I want you to think of the last talk or message or sermon you listened to and you could barely force yourself to pay attention. My question is, what did that communicator do wrong? Because here's the truth. No one sits down and tries to write a bad message. No one stands up to teach with the goal of teaching a boring message. So the question is, what are these speakers not doing right, and what can we learn from them? Because here's the danger. If you don't understand what they are doing wrong, you could be guilty of doing the same thing and making the same mistakes. In this video, I want to give you one overarching answer to that question, and then 3 practical ways to start off your next talk or message, because I believe a great message begins with a great introduction. So, what are these speakers doing wrong, and what can we make sure that we do right in an introduction to a talk? Here is my very simple but I think true answer. When a talk is boring, usually it's because the speaker or teacher never gave the audience a reason to listen. Here's the principle. If you want people to pay attention to you, you have to give them a reason to. And here's an important point for any Bible teachers, pastors, youth pastors. Should is not a reason, okay? A lot of Christian teachers think, well, it's the Bible, so they should want to learn and listen. Maybe they should. I don't know if it's a result of the fall or just the way God wired us, but the truth is, in our world today, the way people are wired, they will not pay attention to you unless you give them a reason to. And should is not a reason. You need to give them a reason to listen. So how do you do that? Here are 3 practical ways that you can take and see which one fits with your next message. Number 1, I call this the apologetic approach. You can think of this as how to explain or how to defend a certain topic. Now this works really well if you're teaching or preaching or communicating on a topic that a lot of non-Christians are either confused about or even tend to attack. Now the way you set this up is you start off by sharing a quote or a video clip or even a personal story of a time when you talked to someone and they brought this up and were confused about it or it didn't make sense to them. Then you have the audience or class share with each other a time when they were asked about this topic or when it got brought up in conversation or a time when they even were confused about it. And then you offer the reason to listen. Today, I want to teach you about this topic. And I not only want to teach you how to understand it, I want to equip you to be able to explain it to someone else. So, for example, in my Old Testament class, I have one lecture devoted to the topic of holy war and genocide from the books of Deuteronomy and Joshua. And so I start off that class by quoting Richard Dawkins, who says, the God of the Old Testament is the most bloodthirsty and vindictive character in all of fiction. And he goes on and on. And then I have them share, hey, when is a time when someone asked you or was troubled about the violence related to the God of the Old Testament? And then I give them reason to listen. This is a topic that confuses a lot of people, and for some, even keeps them from accepting Christianity because it's so disturbing to them. So I want to help you today not just understand these texts in light of their cultural and historical context, but I want to help you be able to explain what's going on here to someone else. Secondly, the how to succeed approach, or you can think of this how to become like such and such a person. Now this works really well if your main idea is connected to a positive character trait that the Bible holds up that we should embrace, like love or serving others or patience or self-control. And what you do is you start off by sharing someone who's a hero in that area, someone who gets it really right. Now, you do not want this to be you, okay? You should not be the hero of your own story as you start off a talk, because that comes across as arrogant. Usually because it is arrogant, okay? Then you have them share about someone they know who gets this right and what you admire about that. And then you give them a reason to listen. The question I want us to explore together today is how could we become those kind of people? And I want to share with you what God's Word teaches about that. So, for example, if you were teaching on faith, you may start with a story of like George Mueller. and how he trusted God for everything. He never asked anyone for a dime. There's stories about him, sitting down at breakfast in the orphanage and praying and saying, God, thank you for this food, when there was no food. And before they finish praying, someone knocks on the door and says, hey, I have this milk. I was supposed to deliver it, but my car just broke down. It's going to go bad if it just sits there. By the time it's fixed, can you guys use it? And then have them share stories of people they admire for their faith and say, how can we become like that? How can we get that kind of faith that trusts God in such crazy circumstances? Finally, there's the how not to fail intro. I think of this as the exact opposite of the previous one. In this introduction, you start off actually with a story of failure, and this can be from your own life. So we're talking about this topic tonight, but I just want to be honest with you. I've gotten this really wrong at times and places in my life. And here's a particular time. Then you have them share. When is the time in your life when you got this wrong, and what were the negative consequences? Then you give them the reason to listen. Tonight, I want to share with you how we can avoid making this mistake in the future. We all know that it can be really costly to friendships or whatever in our lives when we make this mistake. So how can we keep from doing that? So, for example, if I was creating a video on how to make a great introduction, I might start off by saying, think of a boring teacher. What are they doing wrong? I don't want to get that wrong. You don't want to get that wrong. So what can we do to make sure we get that right? So just to recap, here are 3 ways you can introduce your next talk. Number 1, the apologetic approach. You talk about why it's important and how to defend a certain topic. Number 2 is the how to succeed approach, or how to become like this person approach. And number 3 is the how to avoid failure approach, how not to become like a certain person. So I want to encourage you, next time you are writing a message or giving a talk, give your audience or class or students a reason to listen, because they will not pay attention to you unless you give them a reason to. Now, one word of warning as you consider this: please do not overpromise and underdeliver. Okay? If you tell them in your introduction, I am going to help you understand this to the point that you will be able to explain this to someone else, you better deliver on that. You better make it clear and simple enough that they can actually do that, because if you don't, that is a form of deception. Jim Rayburn once said that it's a sin to bore kids with the gospel. I would expand, I think it's wrong to bore anyone with biblical truth. And the fact is, biblical truth isn't boring, but here's the thing, they will perceive it as boring unless we give them a reason to listen. I don't want to be a boring communicator, neither do you, or you wouldn't be watching this video, okay? So the next time you give a message or talk or a class or preach a sermon, give your audience a reason to listen to you, and they will. Hey guys, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. My name is Luke Hyron, and my desire is to help you create messages that change lives for good. If this content was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. For more free resources, go to my site, makeyourmessagegreat.com. There you can download my go-to outline that helps you teach to every learning style in the room with the goal of life transformation. I believe with God's help, you can instruct minds, equip bodies, and inspire hearts to live the Jesus way of life.